Welcome to another episode of the Live Ultralight podcast powered by Outdoor Vitals. This podcast is about inspiring you to get outdoors, showing you how to lighten your pack and build your confidence so you can start living your life full of adventure. I am Joe, and I'm here today with Tayson and Stephen Smith, who is a blogger and YouTuber who shares his passion via the channel and website mylifeoutdoors. In addition to hiking and backpacking, Stephen is also a paddler, skier, and climber. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you. Doing pretty good. I'm glad to be here.
So where are you based?
I am in East Texas, which is not where I really want to be at this moment. But my wife is a therapist in private practice, and she's got a booming practice here. And so it looks like we're stuck here for a little while, but I would really love to be closer to some mountains. We got nothing out here.
Oh, where did you grow up then?
I grew up in Texas, grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and spent my time traveling to Colorado mainly to spend time outdoors. But been stuck here pretty much ever since, been trying to get to Colorado or someplace out west for a very long time and just never been able to make it happen.
So what kind of backpacking is there in Texas? I know there's Big Bend.
Well, so I've been asked this question before, and I'll tell you, Texans get really defensive about Texas, and especially Texas backpacking. But I have tried pretty much all the backpacking that there is in Texas, and I'm here to tell you that there's not a whole lot. And so, like, if you go to West Texas, you've got Big Bend, you've got the Guadalupe Mountains, and those are like some real serious, authentic mountains. But other than that, the problem with Texas is there isn't any public land. And so the most public land we have are those two national parks. And then we have a national forest down by Houston, but it's just flat, thick pine forest is all it is. And so there's actually a long distance trail in I want to say it's the Sam Houston National Forest. I think it's 110 miles, but it's all just flat forest, green tunnel type stuff, that you're never going to get any elevation. You're never going to get any views. You're going to have real tannic creeks and things like that. And so other than that, we've got a bunch of state parks that are like maybe 5 miles square total each park. And so you could hike the whole thing in a day and be done. And so there's just not a whole lot of backpacking opportunity in Texas, which is one of the reasons why I say I wish I could be somewhere out west.
So you growing up in Texas, the outdoors was a part of your life. Who introduced you to the outdoors? Your parents or?
So yeah, my parents did, but they didn't intend to. And so I tell a story that I don't know how my dad feels about this story, but when I was growing up, I was never in sports, like never played basketball, baseball, football, anything like that. And football is actually really big in Texas. And I didn't ever think anything of it until one day, I think maybe in high school or something like that, I realized how strange it was that I'd never really ever played sports. And so I asked my dad, I was like, "Hey, Dad, how come you never put me in sports?" And he said, "Well, son, I didn't want to sit outside and watch you." And so I was like, well, okay. But what my dad did do, and my mom too, is they took me skiing twice a year. Spring break and Christmas, we'd go for a week skiing in Colorado. So in the Texas Hill Country, there's some pretty well-known rivers, the Guadalupe and the Kamal River, that are famous for tubing. And so you go down there, you get an inner tube, you float down the river and do all that kind of stuff. And so every summer we would go tubing on the Kamal and Guadalupe rivers. And I remember early on, somewhere in my childhood, tubing the Guadalupe River and just loving being on that river. The Guadalupe is much more wild and scenic than the Kamal, but being on that river, and we were driving past some storefronts somewhere near the river, and I saw a sign for kayaking lessons. And I remember thinking, that's what I want to be doing. Like, forget this tubing stuff. Like, I want to learn how to kayak. And of course, my parents, they would take me camping, they would take me skiing, they would take us tubing, they'd do all those kinds of things, but they were not very outdoorsy people other than that. But my mom had a really good friend who they would always talk about how he would go camping, and that he would go camping where they would call it primitive camping. He would go primitive camping, and I'd say, well, what's that? And they said, well, they don't have water and electricity, because all the camping we did as a kid, was all like state parks where it had hookups and things like that. We were in a tent, but we had, power and all that kind of stuff. And I remember thinking about that friend of my mom's and being like, that's what I want to do. And so it's kind of those two things, like seeing the kayaking lesson sign and seeing and hearing about my mom's friend who did the primitive camping and being like, forget this stuff that we're doing. Like, I want to be like out there as much as I can. And so when I became an adult, I ended up buying a kayak, got into kayaking. There's lots of rivers in Texas that you can kayak, and started wanting to do some multi-day trips. And to be able to spend more than one day on the river, I needed some gear that would fit down in the hole of my kayak. And so ended up buying a ton of backpacking gear. And before long, I had everything I needed to go backpacking except for a backpack. And so I bought a backpack and started backpacking, and I've been in love with it ever since.
Well, we are a backpacking company here at Outdoor Vitals. So I'm wondering, have you ever gotten into like, I guess from that, okay, well, let me backtrack a little bit. Like, as far as backpacking, you got into kayak and all that. When did you start actually like backpacking? I
started backpacking somewhere around 2008, 2009 is when I would say that I really started backpacking, which is also about the time that I started my blog, My Life Outdoors. And part of it was because the blog was intended to be like everything outdoorsy, and wanted to go backpacking because I had some friends that had gone, and I was thinking, you know what, like this would be great stuff for the blog. And so bought a backpack, went out with some of my friends, fell in love with backpacking, and eventually all my content started morphing away from skiing and paddling and all that kind of stuff more into backpacking, to the point that my YouTube channel now I consider it pretty much exclusively a backpacking channel.
It's pretty heavy on the backpacking side. So I was wondering that when I was looking at like the rest of your site.
Yeah.
Why did you start the blog? What was, you just like to write, or?
No, actually. So that's the reason why I started the channel, was because I had been blogging for, I don't know, however many years. And I'm dyslexic, and I've got a number of learning and reading disabilities. I'm a terrible speller. I can't use grammar to save my life. And so like my blog is just horrible, especially early blog. Like if you go, like everything's misspelled, there's no proper grammar or anything like that. And for a while there, like the blog ended up going away for a little while because I had some issues with the web hosting and all that kind of stuff, and was working a full-time job, and it was just too hard. And so like the blog went down for several years, and I was like, I can't figure it out right now. And then I brought it back somewhere around 2019 and started blogging again pretty heavily. And a friend of mine who I'd met since sometime before that, but while the blog was down, was reading and all that kind of stuff. And he came to me and he was like, dude, man, like, why are you messing around with this writing stuff? Why are you messing around with this blog? It's like, you're a terrible blogger. He's like, you need to make videos. And I was like, well, and I had done some video stuff, for a lot of different things, but had never done anything like a YouTube channel. He's like, you need to do a YouTube channel. And he started sending me a bunch of different videos on YouTube and stuff like that. And he's like, you could do so much better. And so I was like, I don't know, man, it seems like a lot of work and, all this kind of stuff. But I had a trip planned that March, I want to say, maybe it was May. I think it was that May of 2019. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do a video while I'm on this trip. And so I did. And the very first video on my channel is actually that video. And it was a video of the Matilla Wilderness in Southern California. And so I just happened to be in California for a few days, decided to go out there and do a 3-day backpacking trip. And I made a video of it, did this weird thing where I had the camera, here, but I was looking off screen like someone was interviewing me, even though it was just me, and did this voiceover type thing for that first video, and was like, all right, I think I can do this. Put out a total of 5 videos, I think, in 2019. It was really hard. Like, they take a lot of work. I know you guys probably know. And pretty much gave up after that when the pandemic hit, and was like, I don't have time for this. And then 2021, March, I had a trip planned to the Grand Canyon, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a video, and I'm gonna revive the channel. And I did. And on that trip, with a good friend of mine, I decided I'm going to make a video every week, and I'm going to dedicate myself to that. And had no plans of it being like anything big or I mean, I'm doing it full time now, and really did not think of it as being something that could be a job or, provide for my family the way that it does. But just decided that I was going to put effort into it, that I enjoyed it, and that I wanted it to be more than what it was. And so started making a video every week and started putting them out. And somewhere around October of 2021, it really started taking off.
That's cool. So as far as, so if you guys listening at home, if you go to my Life Outdoors, the channel, it's a lot of gear related videos. Why do you focus on gear? I'm curious.
Well, like, I don't know how much you guys watch the channel, and I would not be offended.
It this morning. You said,
did you really?
You said, I hate this. I hate this because if I post something that I want to post, no one watches it. But if I post about gear, I get all these views. So I post about this, right? Which it's crazy, but it's totally true, right? Like that's been a hard part for our YouTube channel, is it's like, because we're Outdoor Vitals, right? Like we don't just pit product against everything all the time and stuff like that. But yeah, like I'll just answer that one for you because you've come out and said that publicly for sure.
Well, yeah, and that's the answer that I was going to give, and my last video, like you said, was about that. Is that people want to see gear videos, and I'm a gear junkie. Like I love it, and and I love digging into gear, and I love doing the reviews, and I love sorting through and researching and doing all those kinds of things. But the main reason is because people want to see gear, and when you do a video that's not gear, and so there's been a few comments on that video that have got me thinking in a different direction, and some of the comments are saying that the reason why we watch gear videos is because it allows us to be a part of the outdoors even during the times that we can't be a part of the outdoors. And so, like, if you go and you watch somebody's trip video, well, it's beautiful and it's serene and all that kind of stuff, but you can't relate to it if you haven't been on that particular trail as much. But you can relate to the gear, and you can think about, okay, yeah, if I get this tent, or if I get this backpack, or I get this, then that's going to help me on my next trip. And it helps you be connected to your next trip, even when you're not on your next trip. And so thinking about that, I was like, there's some real validity to that. And I think that is true for me as well, because I watched a lot of gear videos, and I love the gear. I'm obsessed with gear just as much as anybody else. So.
Yeah, and I'll just throw a pitch in here too. One of the things I think you do exceptionally well, Stephen, for those of you that haven't watched your channel, is you're just very thorough, and you're very versed on the gear. There's definitely some channels out there that I'll watch, and I'll just kind of think like, they just really didn't do their homework. They don't actually know the reasons behind designs and why it has to be this way or why it doesn't have to be this way. And I think you come in with a very, I don't want to say unique perspective, but it is unique in the sense that you're very well versed. You're out using the gear, and then you're writing of your videos and the shots you take and stuff. They're done really, really well. So I mean, from what I've watched, and I've seen a handful of your videos, I just feel like you're very thorough. You do know what you're talking about, and it's worth watching because, how to say this? Sometimes in the world we live in, you can become an expert with not being an expert, right? And you don't know what I'm talking about, right? No, but you can tell when guys get it. And from my perspective, working to design a lot of gear, you know what you're talking about, and I think that bleeds through, and people believe that. And the beard gives you a lot of authority. So
it does do that. Yeah, well, I really do appreciate you saying that, because imposter syndrome is a real thing. And there are a lot of times when I'm making a video and I'm just like, what? I got no business talking about this stuff. And especially you feel that way whenever you get comments from someone who is more knowledgeable than you. And I learn stuff all the time from my viewers. I'll say something, and I'll say something with a fair amount of confidence. And then I'll have someone come in and say something and cite sources. In fact, so I've got a video about bear spray that is still pretty controversial, but I was an adamant bear spray carrier. Like, I carried bear spray. It didn't matter where I was carrying bear spray, and did a video about it, or I mentioned it in a gear loadout video. about the bear spray. And I had a commenter that commented and said, like, you don't have to be carrying bear spray when you're in black bear country. And he cited like 5 or 6 different sources. And I was like, what? You know, and like sometimes you get comments like that and you're just like, whatever, dude. But I ended up reading a bunch of that stuff. And and by the time I got done reading all the stuff that he cited, I was like, I'm a believer. Like, I believe it. And so the bear spray video I did, the very first trip that I did not take bear spray, I was headed to the Olympic National Park and didn't want to fork out, you can't fly with bear spray, and didn't want to fork out $50 for a can that I was just going to, leave in the rental car whenever I got done. And so I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just not going to carry it. And that was the very first time I came face to face with a bear. Very first time I didn't have bear spray, and walked up on him. And this is all in the video too. Like, walked up on him and, saw him before he saw me, and was real quiet. And I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And so I started thinking about it, and I was like, all right, I need to scare him off. I was still plenty far away from him. And so I yell, "Hey, bear." And I've got this in the video, and the bear he's eating something, and he just looks up and it just goes right back to what he's doing. And that's all that bear did. And so we ended up walking right past him on the trail, about, I don't know, maybe 50 yards away. And he never bothered us. So.
Right. So you're a believer now?
Well, I am, but like, I get comments on that video every day that are like, you're going to kill somebody, talking about stuff like this, or you're going to get killed, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, if that ever happens, that'll be the worst possible thing. But in the meantime, I don't know. And mainly it's because it's the flying, you're forking out the money for the bear spray when you just got to throw it away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've always said, this is just something I've believed forever, which is, fear is just unknowns, right? Like, you're scared of the dark as a kid because what does it mean? It means you don't know what you can't see. There could be something there, you can't see it. And I think that's a lot of people's experiences with bears, or with even sleeping for the first time on their own, or maybe doing their first solo backpacking trip, is they've never done it. And because they haven't done it, it's an unknown. And when it's an unknown, there's fear, with it. And so my thought is that you get extremes, right? Because to me, I'm not as worried about a black bear, but I'm not totally comfortable with them because I haven't spent a lot of time with them. But for me, like, grizzly bears are terrifying. I'm probably packing heat when I'm in grizzly bear country, right? But then you talk to people that are like, oh yeah, I've walked by 30 grizzly bears and they're nothing. They're just, you know what I mean? And it's just, they just have that association with it. So I would imagine on a topic like that, you would get both extremes, guys who've never been around a bear, but are like my dad, who's absolutely convinced that a bear would just eat them if it even saw them or smelt them 2 miles away. You know what I mean? And then there's the guys that are like, oh, I'd pet a black bear in the wild.
Okay. So you guys got time for a quick story?
Oh, absolutely.
So I did a trip in Glacier National Park. I don't remember how many years ago. It was me and my wife. I actually won the trip. It was an all expense paid trip to Glacier. And so I got a guided 5-day backpacking trip through Glacier, which I probably wouldn't be able to do it anyways, because getting permits is a horrible process. But so we were on that trip and we drove up there and my parents met me and they took my kids because it was just me and my wife and a guide. And we went 5 days into the backcountry and they just, kind of did like the front country stuff there in Glacier. And my mom sat down for a guided led talk about bears. And she's got my kids there, and they like file in, and like sit down with my dad and my kids. And the ranger says, I don't want to startle anyone, but a man was mauled to death in the backcountry today. We'll have more information about that after the talk. And then she goes into this talk about bears. And so my mom is just sitting there going, oh my God, that's my son. Like my son was mauled to death in the backcountry. She's like, this is how I'm going to find out that my son was mauled by a bear. And then she realizes that my kids are there. She's like, oh my goodness. Like, this is how they're going to find out that their dad has died. And so my dad is terrible. He has really bad hearing. And so she's trying to like nudge him and like discreetly be like, we got to get out of here. Like, we got to get up and we got to walk out. Like we got to get out before they start talking about, who it is that died. And my dad's like, what? I can't hear him, which my dad doesn't sound like that, but I always do that impersonation of him. And anyways, and so long story short, they don't get out of the talk. And the ranger says, okay, so now more information about the mauling. a 60-year-old man has been mauled to death. And my mom goes, "Oh, thank God." And everybody at the Ranger-led talk just turns around and looks at her in disgust because she's so thankful that this 60-year-old man has been mauled to death.
That's that's great. I mean, but not really. But
right.
That's
so
hilarious.
my condolences to the family of that man, even though I have no idea who he is or anything like that. But that would be terrible.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Joe, I don't know if you've got additional questions, but
I do.
I'd love to keep going through some of my own too. But
go ahead, Jason.
So, as someone who, let's say you converted to backpacking, right? You didn't grow up in it. Cause that was part of, for me, talk about imposter syndrome or something like that. Like, I didn't grow up backpacking. I grew out outdoors. We spent a ton of time outdoors, but never backpacking. And so I had to go and learn that and whatnot. And I never felt like an expert, in the beginning. So, but I'm just curious, maybe as you went into this, was there ever any big milestones for you that stood out? Maybe it was like your first solo trip, or like your first trip beyond this many miles, or maybe as a trip where you went to high elevation or something like that. Did you ever have any experiences where you're you had some real fear around that? They felt like they're holding you back, but you went and did it and it changed something in your perspective maybe, or.
So, I mean, still to this day, sometimes I get a little anxious anytime I go out. And it's mainly just because, there's always those things, you start thinking about, like, especially early season, kind of every early summer like this, you start thinking about like snow melt and creek crossings and things like that. And you start wondering like, well, am I going to get to some creek, where I've got a bad situation? And I've actually got another really long story about getting stuck on the wrong side of a raging river in a backpacking trip, but I'll save that for another time. And so like, I still get anxious a little bit about different scenarios, but then I find every time I actually start setting foot on trail, a lot of that anxiety just dissipates and goes away. But as far as like a milestone, early on, when I really felt like I didn't know what I was doing, I remember I was going to take a group, and because I didn't feel like I knew enough to take this group on my own, we ended up hiring an outfitter and a guide and all this kind of stuff to like take us on a trip in Colorado. And I was convinced that the terrible, like pieced together gear that I had was not going to be as good as the gear that they were going to outfit us with. And so I ended up leaving most of my stuff at home and just decided I was just going to let, whatever the outfitter gave us was going to be what I took that week. And we got up there and they had the worst possible equipment that was not the kind of stuff, like the kind of stuff that you see videos all the time where people are saying, don't do this, don't take this stuff. Like humongous pots, that you had to lash onto the back of an external frame pack, and it was just clanging against the pack the whole time. And these canvas tents that were, like 4-man canvas tents, and they were so heavy, and the external frame packs, and I mean all this kind of stuff, like stoves that went on like an old Coleman propane canister, so they had the green propane canister. That was the stove they had, and we had one of those Coleman
just
propane
a Boy
canisters.
Scout experience right here.
Right. And I remember thinking, why didn't I bring my gear? And so that gave me some more confidence early on, because I realized that, this professional company that was outfitting these people and guiding these people, that the gear they had wasn't as good as the gear that I had. And so that was helpful.
And you survived though, even with that crazy crappy gear, right?
I did survive, and I enjoyed it.
So why do you get lightweight gear? Because I think you just put out a video about why you don't need like ultralight or expensive gear. I don't remember which it was, but
yeah. So I mean, I don't consider myself like a true ultralighter, but I have a lot of ultralight gear, and one of the things that I talk about not as often as I'd like to on the channel is Take a Seat. I'm
your
a
shirt?
firm believer.
By the way.
This is my shirt.
Nice.
This is My Life Outdoors on there.
Yes.
You can get them. You can get them on my channel if you want to wear one.
Go support them, guys. If you
right.
Take a seat, then you should definitely have that
And so like, I mean, like I'm the kind of person that 99% of the time I'm going to be taking my Chair Zero with me. And that's a lot because I'm not a big mileage person, you know, like I like to be out as long as possible. I don't necessarily care about covering as much distance as possible. And I want to enjoy it. So I just don't want to, you know, just destroy myself on trail and be exhausted.
This will tell me a lot about you. Who was more exhausted, you or Dan Becker on trail?
Well, okay. So we were coming up the first incline, and I like to stop a lot, especially when I'm going up inclines. And you know, I mean, I live at 1,500 feet, something like that elevation. And so anytime I get up higher, like, you know, I'm feeling it in my lungs. And so like when I start to feel it, like I stop and I take a standing break until I'm ready. And then I keep going. And so I was stopping, and Dan goes, "You're my kind of backpacker." And I was like, I'm so glad you said that because I mean, especially when you're going with other people, like you feel self-conscious about it, you know, but that's another thing. Like I don't train really, you know, I mean, I go about once a month or more, on different trips and stuff like that. And that's the most training that I do. Like I'm not climbing stairs or anything like that to get ready for a trip. But all that to say, I also don't like carrying a ton of weight, you know, and realized early on that like I had to reduce some of this. And the thing that held me back for the longest was I bought a really expensive traditional backpack that weighed about 5 pounds. And I had a pretty lightweight tent. I had a lightweight sleeping pad. I had a lightweight cook set and all that kind of stuff. Most of my other stuff was pretty lightweight, if not ultralight. But because I'd spent so much money on that big backpack, like I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it. And then finally I was like, you know what? I'm gonna buy an ultralight and I'm gonna go true ultralight, and started doing that, started messing with it. And I see the benefit 100% that you need to reduce that weight. And there's an analogy that I've used. I've stole this from Darwin on the trail, but I've used it a few times on my channel. That it's like a car pulling a trailer, and like if you want to take more stuff than your car can carry, the trailer is a great idea. But the more stuff you put in that trailer, the more weight you put in that trailer, the more the car is going to bog down, especially when you're going uphill. The more gas you're going to use, the more it's going to wear on the brakes as you're going downhill. And so you need to be aware of that, you know, and people who've pulled trailers, you know, especially with smaller vehicles, I mean, they realize how much it really taxes the car. And same thing with people, you know, if you want to carry that weight, great, but you're going to be burning more calories. You're going to be worn out. You're not going to go as far. You're going to need to stop more often, and all those kinds of things. And so I really do see the benefit. And my base weight hovers around, I would say 13 to 15 pounds most times. And so more of the lightweight category.
I would never knock anyone for being sub 15. I think so many people get so hung up on 10, right? Like they get so hung up on 10, but they never talk about the variables, right? So what are the variables when people are talking about 10? Well, usually if they're sub 10, they're, you know, in like a 30 or 45 degree quilt. They're probably not 6'2", 6'3" like me. So they're not in long, wide gear. You know, they don't have a long, wide pad and a long, wide sleeping bag. And they just, there's all these factors, right? Whereas like us, it's like, we're usually going to high elevation, or in the winter, you know, we're at low elevations, but either way, we're running a lot of 30, 30 is the warmest bag we even make, right? Like we make typically in a 15 degree bag most of the year. And again, just bigger size, et cetera. And so I think people really get hung up on it. Whereas for me, what I'll typically end up doing, just natural, I guess for me, is I'll typically pack close to a 10-pound base weight, but then I'll figure out about 2 pounds worth of stuff I want to take. Sometimes it's a pair of binoculars. Sometimes it's a fishing pole. Sometimes it's a chair, you know, just kind of add back in until I'm usually, I would say, hitting the trail a lot of times when I'm backpacking at 12-ish pounds. Right. And so to me though, I start to be like, I think you really need to cut weight when you're like closer to 20 or above. It's crazy. People will follow us and, you know, even be members of our membership, different things, and they'll still be over 20-pound base weights. And so those are the guys that I'm like, you got no excuses, guys. Like, you got to get it down. It really matters. So one thing I want to follow up with, because I was thinking about this analogy the other day too, is just, have you seen the miles that you do on trail increase as your base weight has gone down?
No, because I usually plan out pretty close to whatever mileage I'm going to do in advance. And so by the time I get to, and so I've noticed this. So you tell me if you've ever noticed this, that if I plan for a 10 to 12 mile day, then I could do a 10 to 12 mile day. Like if I'm thinking about it ahead of time, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a 10 to 12 mile day. Like I can do it. But if I only plan to do a 7 mile day, then by the time I get to 7 miles, I'm like, I'm done. And it's more of like a mental preparation than it is anything else. And so like I've done those trips where you got to squeeze in, big miles because you want to do the whole loop or whatever before the weekend's out, and you got something happening, that makes you have to get back home in time, on Monday or whatever. And so you'll put the big miles in for those days. But if I've got the time and I find myself most comfortable whenever I'm doing a lot of filming when I'm on trail. And so I need time to stop and do all that stuff. And I'm stopping every, I don't even know, 300 feet or so, to film something or something else and stuff like that. And so I just need extra time when I'm on trail. And two, going back to the weight, I'm carrying quite a bit of camera weight. They don't make ultralight camera gear. I guess they do, but the camera gear that I have,
your quality that you put on your channel.
That's right. That's right. And I just upgraded my camera recently, and it the whole setup, tripod and everything, batteries, I'm probably 6 pounds or more just camera gear. Now, a lot of that's in my hand the whole time. So technically it's not part of base weight, because I'm carrying, I guess it's worn weight, whatever you want to say.
Weight, man. It all adds up.
Exactly.
No, it does. People don't talk about that a lot. And if I'm going out without Joe, I just take a GoPro. Don't tell anyone that, but but when Joe comes or depending on trail distance, then we'll bring tripods and bigger, heavier camera equipment. But we a lot of times we're doing 20+ mile days, and it's just critical to not have to take big bulky camera gear, and it's a factor for sure. But
yeah,
sorry, Joe, I commandeered time for a bit, so
that's all right.
I'll let you ask the next question. So
what's been your favorite backpacking trip you've gone on so far?
Probably Glacier National Park, that trip I was talking about a little bit ago. That place is just absolutely phenomenal. I don't know if y'all have ever been up there, but most gorgeous landscape I've ever seen in my entire life. Nothing compares to it in my mind.
Where have you been besides there? Just so people can kind of give reference to what you have seen and compared to.
I've been in the West, pretty much everywhere that you can think of. So I've been to Yosemite. I've been to Yellowstone. I've been to Washington, Olympic, and Rainier, and North Cascades. I've been all throughout the Sierras. I've spent quite a bit of time in Colorado. And so probably most of the backpacking I've done has been Colorado wilderness areas and stuff like the Wiminooch and the Holy Cross Wilderness, and just got back from Lost Creek on this last trip. And so I've been quite a few places in the West, and Glacier, I mean, it is the crown jewel of all of it in my mind.
Yeah.
It's cool.
I didn't hear Utah on that list, so we might have to change that at some
time.
For you.
I was in Utah just earlier this year. The first big trip I did this year was to Coyote Gulch. And so did Coyote Gulch.
Our neck of the woods, my friend.
Yeah. So I loved it. And it's a different kind of backpacking. And so, it's just beautiful and gorgeous, but yeah, no, I've done Grand Canyon. So Coyote Gulch and some of the places there in southern Utah. Never been to Zion. Never really hit any of the big national parks in southern Utah, but want to. Zion is on my bucket list for sure. Want to go out there and do some stuff out there.
What is kind of your big bucket list item?
So I've never done a through hike of a larger trail. And so and not counting, not doing like the big 3 type stuff, because I got 4 kids and a family. Like I'm not going to be able to get away for that long. But if I was going to do a through hike, the John Muir Trail is one that's kind of on my bucket list. And then probably second to that would be the Colorado Trail. And so those are 2 that I've spent some time on the John Muir Trail. I've done about 40 miles on the John Muir, and it's spectacular and phenomenal, and would really love to do more of that. And the Colorado Trail, I've been different segments on that, not intentionally, but just through other hikes, ended up on the Colorado Trail for a few miles, and it seems like a trail that I really want to do.
If you could only pick, I'm guessing this would be backpacking, but maybe I'm wrong. If you could only pick one outdoor activity to do for the rest of your life, what would it be? It
would probably be backpacking.
All right.
I just realized the sun has come up and has hit my camera. You guys need me to fix that?
So it looks beautiful.
Does it?
Good.
I haven't been looking at it, so I didn't even realize that.
I just barely started doing that.
Okay. Well, I can try to fix it if you guys need me to.
Nah, I think we're almost wrapped up here. Jason, do you have any other questions?
Oh, I'm gonna take all the time.
All right.
Don't worry about it. I get a guy like Steven on here. I can talk forever. So, I'm curious because I think everyone kind of has things that they've got expertise in, or they're better at, or they're more interested in, and whatnot. And so, as I'm thinking of your channel and some things I hear you talk about, and I'm curious what you would say is like your, I don't want to say superpower, but like what you're the expert at. If you're going on trail with some friends, like what are you known as? Like where do you kind of, even in your own mind, just say like, I don't know, this guy's younger and fitter, but I might know this, or maybe you're the guy that just plans out all the trips, or like, what are you known at? And what do you feel like maybe you've got some extra expertise that would make people want to follow you and listen to what you have to say?
Oh goodness. So I mean, like I know quite a bit about gear, and it's mainly because I'm a researcher type person. Like I have to consume knowledge, and I'm really interested in backpacking, and kind of what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, that it gives you a way that you can be a part of your next trip, but even before you're on your next trip. And so I since I've heard that, I've thought that is a big part of what it is. So I'm constantly researching and studying and all that kind of stuff. But that applies to just about anything. It's just like trip planning and things like that. Like I did a trip with some other guys recently, and felt like they had more experience than I did. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to let them, and it was kind of their trip that I was crashing a little bit. And so I was like, I'm just going to let them, plan everything, and I'm just going to tag along. And started to realize as I was packing for the trip that I needed some information to figure out, what I was going to pack. And so I started asking some questions, and they were like, well, I don't know, maybe this, maybe that. And I'm like, well, you don't know? And so I was like, well, I'm going to go find out. And so I went and found out. And then after a while, like I started to realize, like, I'm the one that's going to be putting in the effort to figure out like what I need to know. And so after a while, I just started saying like, hey, like, I think we ought to do this. And they're like, oh, that sounds great. I'm like, okay, well, I also think, we need to do this. Like, this is where we need to spend night 1, and this is where we need to spend night 2. And I'm thinking this is a trailhead we need to go in at, and this is a trail we need to go out at. And they're like, oh, that sounds all great. Sign me up. And so I'm like, I just planned the trip, And so like, I mean, it's just kind of my personality to seek out the information. And so pretty much anything. And my wife teases me too, that, she calls me the park ranger. And cause I've got, I don't know, if you watch any of my trip videos, I got this big cotton wide brim hat that I wear, and it kind of looks like.
Did you say cotton?
It is. It's made out of cotton.
The gear guy is wearing a cotton hat.
Oh, well, I mean, once it gets cold, I've got a warm hat that I'm going to put on, but it's my sun hat, okay. And it is a cotton hat, and I love it.
People don't understand this. Cotton, that's where cotton thrives, is in the heat, right? Because it'll hold moisture and keep you cool. So, you know what you're talking about. I'm not discrediting anything here.
But so that hat kind of looks like a park ranger hat, And so she teases me because I'll get questions on the trail. Like people will walk up and I'll be like, hey, like where is the trailhead for this, or whatever. And she says that the reason why she teases me is because pretty much every time they ask, even though I'm not a park ranger, I know the answer. And so, so I'll be like, oh, well, yeah, you need to go down here a little ways, do this and, whatever else. And, so I'll have the answer or whatever it is, and I'll be able to help them out. And she's like, see, that person didn't even know that you weren't a park ranger.
Right. You just played the part.
Yeah, right.
That's
but I mean, awesome. I don't know. Like I seek out information and if I don't have it, like I'll be looking for it almost immediately as soon as I realize that I don't have whatever the information is.
Yeah. What did you do before YouTube and before you went full time with YouTube?
So I was a full-time minister. I was actually a youth minister for 20 years and just got to the point where I was burnt out and couldn't do it anymore. And so ended up resigning from my position January the 1st, 2021, and had saved up enough money to take a year off because I was just so terribly burnt out that I need some time off, and decided I was going to take a year off. So I saved up enough money to take a year off of work and started the YouTube channel back up because I had done it a little bit before then, as I said earlier. Started the YouTube channel back up in March of 2021. And by October, I realized that I could make it into a job and I could make money from it. And so now I am.
That's so interesting because I know of multiple
You're not
people.
the only, exactly.
Yeah,
You're not the only minister I've talked to.
John Kelly, Dan Becker used to do that stuff. There's a few, but also the top of mind for me is we were just out hiking on the AT trail. And so much of the trail magic that happens out there is put on by church organizations and stuff. And that's just something I don't know if you relate to this, but I really relate to on the spiritual side, just the outdoors. Like the outdoors is where I feel, closest to deity and can connect with myself, spiritually and those types of things, which is really interesting. Is that kind of, it sounded like you were taking youth groups into the wilderness at times. And
yes, well, yeah, I certainly was. So I was a youth minister and I would take a group of about 15 teenagers every summer and we'd go to Colorado and we would do probably 4 days, I think is what we would end up doing. And it was like legit wilderness backpacking, stuff like that. And yeah, you are 100% correct. Whether you believe in God or not, whatever higher source or, divine power you believe in, I believe that nature connects you to that. And so I feel it every time I go out, and there's something about the quietness, something about the scenery, something about the air, that just, I don't know, it connects to your soul in a way that I feel like a lot of things can't.
Yeah. All those good thumbnails you put out there pulling my attention. So when I get out there and I can't just be, distracted by that, it's helpful, right? To me, it's kind of the yin to the yang of the world we live in now with just so much grabbing your attention all the time. Right.
Yeah.
But going back to what you're saying about kind of going full time with YouTube and making a go of that. I'm curious what your best video of all time has been and why you think it, was so popular.
So the best video of all time's got just over 500,000 views, 600,000 views. And so it's actually a video about treating your rain jacket with DWR, retreating your rain jacket with Nick Wax. And it actually came about because I was on a trip last summer and all my rain gear wetted out on me. I had some pretty heavy storms and it all wetted out on me and I was just soaked to the bone and was miserable at times and stuff like that. And I was like, I need to go home and I need to retreat everything. And he even said to somebody, because somebody passed on the trail, it's a pretty popular, busy trail. And someone's like, oh, how you doing? And I had all my rain gear like draped off the back of my backpack, trying to dry it all out, and everything. And somebody said, how you doing? And I said, oh, not as good as I could be. All my rain gear failed on me last night or something like that. And the person said, oh, someone's going to be making some expensive decisions when you get home. And I remember thinking, well, you don't have to. And so I thought, I'm going to do a video about it. And so I bought some Nick Wax, treated my rain jacket, kind of showed how to treat it and talked about the reasons why you need to. And I titled it "The Outdoor Industry's Dirty Secret" because I realized how many people don't know that you not only can you, but you need to retreat your DWR membrane jackets on a regular basis to keep them functioning the way that they're designed to work. And I thought, and I've gotten lots of comments. People are like, "Wow, that's not a secret." They tell you that on the care tag. And I'm like, yeah, but the thing is, like, people don't know it. And the gear companies aren't necessarily invested in you doing that, because if you think your gear failed, you'll just go buy another jacket and it's money in their pocket. And so and I didn't talk about that aspect a whole lot, but that was the idea behind that. It was a dirty secret. And so when I published that video, I thought it was going to do well just because of the dirty secret. I thought, oh, people are going to be interested in that, but it didn't for a very long time. Like, it just tanked for months. And then one day it just took off, and it climbed so fast that I didn't even know what was going on. And that video led to, October the 1st, or maybe it was September, I can't remember. October the 1st, 2021, I had 2,000 followers, and that video took off during that month. And by the end of that month, I had over 8,000 followers, all on the course of a month. And so it just blew up, and it's still gaining views.
Yeah, that's such an interesting topic. We're full disclosure, we're releasing a rain jacket in a couple weeks, and I just was out on trail filming a video about the 3 myths of rain jackets, right? Yeah. And there's a lot. I appreciate you doing the video, honestly, because there's a lot of misunderstanding around it, between hydrophilic membranes, hydrophobic membranes, how much rain jackets actually rely on DWR or don't, or so on and so forth. Or the big one that I see a lot too is people actually think that rain jackets are quote unquote breathable, but what is breathable, right? It's waterproof breathable, but it's become slang to not say waterproof breathable, just breathable, right? And so people think you can breathe through the membrane when in reality you can't, right? And they don't understand, because the thing is, I think part of it could be like you're saying, like, if we don't educate, we make more money almost, right? But the other side is it's difficult to educate, right? Because
it is. You
got to get in and talk about hydrophilic versus hydrophobic membranes. Who wants to really hear and understand what that might mean, right? Or people just look only at like the breathability metrics, but don't understand the properties of the membranes, and it goes deep, right? So I think it's really cool that you have the ability to get a video to perform talking about technical aspects like that. To me, that's a superpower. It really is, because it's not like super fun and sexy to go into the technical details, but it is the difference between jackets wetting out and not wetting out, or buying a new piece of gear and not buying a piece of gear. So I think that speaks volumes. I'm going to go, I don't know if I've seen that one, so I'm going to go watch that now for sure. We'll have to get you a rain jacket as well at some point, as soon as we can.
So I've actually got one. I've got an Outdoor Vitals rain jacket that just came in the mail just the other day. And so I'm going to be trying it out.
Yeah. No, that'll be good. Yeah. And if they haven't talked to you already, we ought to have someone make sure we send you over some of the details on like we map 2 different membranes in it for the purpose that you're talking about. And then
I think I've seen something about that, because you've got a different hydrostatic head on the top of the arms, don't you, than you do on the body?
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
So a hydrophilic membrane will pull moisture into it, right? But those are more breathable, waterproof breathable than a hydrophobic membrane. So a lot of companies will use them to get really good breathability numbers. But the problem is, once they wet out, right? Once they get moisture into the porous membrane, they no longer are breathable to anything. Versus if you use a hydrophobic membrane, you're starting out with a lower waterproof breathable number, but it stays the same. You know what I mean? It doesn't wet out. So we kind of mapped that in like the shoulder areas and areas that are taking the most rain, but also the most abrasion, right? You have your shoulder straps pushing moisture in and so on. Anyways, there's a lot to it. But no, you're the kind of guy that, I think that's just really something people should go and subscribe to your channel for, is being able to understand those technical things and make them interesting to watch. the way that you film, the way you cut, the way you edit things. I think it's, and more so the stuff you do off camera of writing that out. I mean, from two guys here on the podcast with you that have, had to script and shoot things. It's no easy task. So, I think you do a phenomenal job at that, and really appreciate you, coming on the podcast with us today. So,
well, thank you. I try, and I appreciate you letting me come on the podcast. I've enjoyed it.
Steven, where can they find you?
So probably the easiest way, but maybe not the best looking way, is mylifeoutdoors.com. So I've got links to pretty much all my videos there. But if you Google My Life Outdoors, you'll probably hit my YouTube channel first, and that's where I'm putting all my energy. And so I've got the YouTube channel. I've also got a TikTok that isn't doing too bad. And so I've got 24,000 subscribers, something like that, on TikTok, and videos are hitting around 10,000 views on average. And so you can find me on TikTok, the blog. It pretty much is all like just transcriptions of my videos. So if you prefer the read, though, then that would be the place to go.
All right. Well, guys, go check that out, and feel free to send us your comments, questions about backpacking, cool outdoor stories, or ideas for future episode topics. You can do that by commenting on our new Live Ultralight podcast YouTube channel, or you can send us an email at liveultralightpodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to send us your positive iTunes reviews, and we'll read those out on the show. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to us on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you again, Steven and Tayson, for coming on to the show.
Thank you.